Very short. All right, James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. Very nice conversation. That's so far. You've been have talking for 52 minutes in my pastime that offered me a very fresh perspective towards the condition of black men in the United States and the psychology of men and women in the society where they're oppressed by their oppressor, that those challenges they need to meet and come out strong and being able to produce stronger young generations to adapt and fit into the world. So, what I'm saying is, you see, it's time to read. It's time to read that, not just in the sense of getting a book, open a book and start reading the text on it, but rather reading means to start by reading your thinking, that you can start actively searching for information and afterwards to analyze these information and keep searching, getting in fresh data, and then use these data in your real life. And reading will do that to you in the way that the phone will never do, because it's two different sets of conditioning for the human mind. The phone you are having is made by thousands of components using electronics and science technology to input information in your mind just by your eyes watching the screen. You had to read whatever the screen is provided. While most people being able to get the good out of their phone for making their life way more convenient and better, we also have the tendency to get into a very reliable position towards our phone in our daily life, that we pay with phone. We almost do everything with phone, with WeChat and the similar platforms, that applications on our phone. We can complete a lot of tasks with phone, and therefore the time that left for us to do other things in our daily life is actually more important. And in these things, we have to eat, sleep, and communicate with each other. We have to make more connections, make stronger connections among ourselves, and also having better understanding towards our situation and a real life in real time. And the reading books, I mean, by reading the paper books, it will prepare us to a completely different psychological conditioning, that we are actually in a very positive, very lively position where we can choose to consume the information we are about to consume in our own speed, in our own manner, and in our own favorite ways. It's not the phone It's not the videos that just give you boom, 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 boom. The book, you can slow it down. You can take it slow and just enjoy the process. Like I've been doing for the last 3 weeks, that reading some part of the book and keep pushing forwards provide me such a pleasure where I get to grow also in this way, in a steady and a very healthy way, that I start to get to know the topics and the subject better and clear, and I also start new things that in world was which mattered very much for a lot of people. And when I get to know them, I felt I become closer to humanity as I wasn't before I know certain information. For example, did you know the Carta Carta, the Granta Carta, the great constitution that was made in England hundreds of years ago, that state as the constitutional law that people are born equal and have their rights of property, freedom of speech, and a lot of other rights. With those rights, they also have the responsibility to maintain this lawful state where they had to honor the law by conducting themselves in ways that is both within the societal expectation of law-abiding good citizen, at the same time having innovation, having doing these new experiments and searching for the sake of his own curiosity and growth. And in this process, society got benefit from these individuals who's trying new things, going to places that nobody ever went to, and broaden the consciousness of human legacy, the human consciousness. And that is such a way that is universally accepted by most people. When you get educated, you get to know your rights and your responsibilities, your duties, so you can better equip yourself in the reality that you're living, and so therefore cope with it, work with it, and innovate with it, and finally get to a very ideal place where you don't lose your freedom, you don't lose your rights, you get to keep them strong, and you get to keep your family and community strong, and where you get to be a very responsible and resourceful member of the society. So, today we keep reading the book Constitution of Liberty, chapter 15. And today is Saturday, February 22nd. Now it's about 11:15 in the morning of rainy Chengdu. Chapter 15: Economic Policy and the Rule of Law. The House of Representatives can make no law which will not have its full operation on themselves and their friends, as well as the great mass of the society. This circumstance has always been deemed one of the strongest bonds by which human policy can connect the rulers and the people together. It creates between them that communion of interest and sympathy of sentiments, of which few governments have furnished examples, but without which every government degenerates into tyranny. James Madison。第15章经济政策与法治。众议院不能制定出对他们自己和他们的朋友以及社会大众不起充分作用的法律。这情况一直被认为是人类政策能给予将统治者和人民连在一起的最强有力的纽带之一。它在他们之间造成一种利益上的共同性和感情上的相通性。很少有政府能提供出如此的范例，但是少了这一点，任何政府都会堕落成为暴政。不能制定出对他们自己和他们的朋友以及对社会大众不起充分作用的法律。你看这里有两个不啊，如果我们把两个不都变成肯定，就是能制定出对他们自己和他们朋友以及对社会大众起充分作用的法律，就是制定有用的法律，不制定没用的法律。这就是我们所说的经济政策的根本所在。这个由詹姆斯麦迪逊指出，一个大家都知道的道理，很简单。主张在经济事务中实行自由的经典论据所依靠的是一个心照不宣的假定，即认为法治应当支配这个领域以及所有其他领域的政策。我们除非以这一点为背景来理解何以亚当·斯密和约翰·斯图尔特·穆勒这样的人如此反对政府干预，否则我们对他们的反对态度的实质就会无法理解。也因为如此，他们的主张常常被一些对这一基本观念不熟悉的人所误解，而法治观念一旦在英美两国不再为每一个读者所视为理所当然，认识混乱就会立即随之而生。经济活动的自由原先曾意味着是法律下的自由，而不是不要任何政府行动。因此，这些作者们从原则上反对的政府干预和干涉，所指的只是对一般性的规律或法律所着意要保护的那个私人领域的侵犯。他们并不是说政府不应该关心任何经济事务，但他们主张某些政府措施从原则上就应该被排除，并且不能以任何实用性的理由来说明这些措施的正当性。在亚当·斯密和他的直接后继者们眼中，执行共同法律的一般规则肯定不是作为政府干预而出现的。他们通常也不会使用政府干预的这个词儿来指立法机构对这些规则的修改，或是对某一新规定的通过。只要这个新规则的用意是要在无限期的时间内一视同仁地适用于所有人，尽管他们也许从未这样明说，但是在他们看来，干预是政府行使强制权利，而不是例行的执行一般性的法律。 而且只在于达到某种具体的目的。但是重要的标准不在于追求什么目标，而是在于采取怎样的方法。如果这明明是人民的需要，那么大概没有什么目标不可以被视为合情合理的。但是这些作者们认为，在一个自由社会中，那些具体专门的命令和禁令，从总的方面来说是不可接受的，因而要加以排除。唯有间接的通过剥夺政府某些他可以单单借此就能达到某些目的的手段，才能通过这个原则做到剥夺政府去追求这些目标的权利。What? The classical argument for freedom in economic affairs rests on the tactic postulate that the rule of law should govern policy in this as in all other spheres. We cannot understand the nature of the opposition of men like Adam Smith or John Stuart Mill to government intervention unless we see it against this background. Their position was therefore often misunderstood by those who were not familiar with the basic conception, and confusion arose in England and America as soon as the conception of the rule of law ceased to be assumed by every reader. Freedom of economic activities have meant freedom under the law, not the absence of all government action. The interference or intervention of government, which those writers opposed as a matter of principle, therefore, meant only the infringement of that private sphere which the general rules of law were intended to protect. They did not mean that government should never concern itself with any economic matters. But they did mean that there were certain kinds of governmental measures which should be precluded on principle and which could not be justified on any grounds of expediency. Could not be justified on any guards of expediency. Dude.
Expediency.
Expediency means doing what is convenient rather than what is normally right. Oh, expediency. But they didn't, but they mean that there were certain kinds of governmental measures which should be precluded on principle and which could not be justified on any grounds of expediency. Precluded on principle and which could. Dude, there's so many concepts.
Precluded.
If something precluded an event or action, it prevents the event or action from happening. Precluded. Precluded on principle and kinds of government measure which should be precluded. To Adam Smith and his immediate successors, the enforcement of the ordinary rules of common law would certainly not have appeared as government interference, nor would they ordinarily have applied this term to an alteration of these rules or the passing of a new rule by the legislature, so long as it was intended to apply equally to all people for an indefinite period of time, though they perhaps never explicitly said so. Interference meant to them the exercise of the coercive power of government, which was not regular enforcement of the general law and which was designed to achieve some specific purposes. The important criterion was not the aim pursued. Criterion. Important criterion. Important criterion was not the aim. Are you kidding? Criterion.
Criterion.
A criterion is a factor on which you judge or decide something. The factor on which a factor. The important factor was not the aim pursued, however, but the method employed. There is perhaps no aim which they would not have regarded as legitimate if it was clear that the people wanted it, but they exclude as general inadmissible in a free society the method of specific orders and prohibitions. Wait a second. Inadmissible? What the heck do you mean?
Inadmissible.
Inadmissible. Inadmissible evidence cannot be used in a court of law. Inadmissible.
Inadmissible.
Inadmissible. Miscible. 不予以采纳的. Inadmissible. If you say that something someone says or does is inadmissible, you think that it is totally unexpected. Unacceptable, inadmissible, unacceptable. Wow, there is perhaps no aim which they would not have regarded as legitimate if it was clear that the people wanted it. What? But they excluded as generally inadmissible in a free society the method of specific orders and prohibition only indirectly by depriving government of some means by which alone it may be able to attain certain ends, may this principle derive government of the power to pursue those ends. What? 后来的经济学家对于这些问题上产生的认识混淆，所应负的责任也不轻。的确，有许多有力的理由可以说明为什么政府关心经济事务的做法是值得怀疑的，以及为什么特别有一种强烈的主张反对政府积极参与经济活动。但是这些论据同那个主张经济自由的论据是不太相同的。这些论据所依据的是这样一个事实，即在这个领域中被提倡的政府措施，绝大多数实际上并非是实用有力。原因或则是这些措施会落空，或是因为其花费高出其得意。这就是说，只要这些措施同法治是相容的，就不能贸然将之当作政府干涉而加以拒绝，而是应该逐一从实用有利的角度加以审查。以往人们反对一切不明智的或是真正有害的措施时，总是习惯于排除不干预原则，但这种习惯做法其结果却是模糊了两种不同的措施的根本分野，一种是可以同自由制度相容的，另一种则是不相容的。如这种认识上的混淆，正中了那些反对自由企业的人们的下怀，他们更乐于加强这种认识上的混淆，鼓吹一个特定措施之可取与否，绝不是一个原则的问题，而总是一个是否实用有利的问题。哇哦！换句话说， 重要的是政府活动有性质如何，政府活动的性质如何，而不是它的活动量大小如何。一个运作中的市场经济要求国家方面有某些参与活动，另外还有些活动会对市场经济运作起协助作用。只要政府的活动属于能与运行中的市场相容的活动，那么市场还可以允许政府还进行更多的活动。但是有一些政府活动是同自由制度所依的根本原则背道而驰的，因此如果要让这个制度运作下去，这些活动就必须通通被排除掉。所以如果一个政府比较而言不那么积极活动，但却做一些措施，那么它对市场经济力量起的损害作用，甚至还会大于一个更为关心经济事务，但却安分守己，只进行一些对经济自发力量有益的活动的政府。那么它对市场经济力量起的损害作用，甚至还会大于一个更为关心经济事务，但却安分守己，进行一些对经济之自发力量有所裨益的活动的政府。The later economists bear a good share of the responsibility for the confusion on these matters. True, there are good reasons why all governmental concern with economic matter is suspect and why. In particular, there is a strong presumption against governments actively participating in economic efforts. But these arguments are quite different from the general argument for economic freedom. They rest on the fact that the great majority of governmental measures which have been advocated in this field are, in fact, inexpedient.他们大部分做的事情是怎么样的呢？不明智的，不
inexpedient,
not suitable, advisable, or judicious. What? Judicious, not suitable, advisable, or judicious. 不合适，不当的，不明智的。你看这个 inexpedient， 我们来分析一下，inexpedient 这个单词在英文的含义里和在我们有道词典上翻译的一个意思的微妙差距。inexpedient 用英文去翻译这个单词本身是 not suitable。Not advisable or not judicious， 这个叫 inexpedient。而在中文中，我们如果去翻译它的这三个点，就是不合适、不被劝 ，advisable 就是适合可以被劝去做的 advisable， 不推荐。不合适、不推荐并且不合法的事物叫 inexpedient， 也就是不当的、不明智的。这个中文翻译过来是不当的、不明智的，它实际上就等于不合适、不建议、不合适、不合法、不建议、不合适、不合法、不当的、不明智的。inexpedient， 所以他把 inexpedient 和不当的或者不明智的联系在一起去理解啊。不明智，什么是不明智呢？就是不当的、不合适的、不合法的，就是不明智的事情。你去做违法的事情是不明智的事情，你去做 不合适的事情就是一个不明智的行为。你去做不推荐别人不推荐你去做的这个事情，这是一个不明智的事情。因为大家如果没有人去推荐你做这个事情，然后你自己去自作主张的去做，那么你就可能会被大家所认为是不明智的，或者说不受欢迎的，或者不明智的、奇怪的。但是我们要回到我们的这个文章本身呢，去理解这个 inexpedient 的这个行为啊，是政府在什么情况下做的呢？They rest on the fact that the great majority of governmental measures which have been advocated in this field are in fact inexpedient。不正当的，就是他在经济活动中采取的一些措施是不正当的，either because they will fail or because they cost will outweigh the advantages。为什么不明智呢？他们做的这些事情为什么不明智呢？只有两个原因，一个是他们这个措施是失败的措施，它必将失败，或者是它这个措施去实施呢，它的成本比这个收益还要大，它的代价要更大，所以这个措施是不明智的。换句话说，当政府的一些政策它是一个不明智的政策的时候，也就是它的成本高于它的收益的时候，这样的政策就是不受欢迎的。那这些政策，尤其是在经济方面的这些政策，大都是失败的或者成本过大的政策呢，我们不建议去在这个政府层面去进行。也就是说，通过宪法的方式，通过法律的方式去制约政府可以做出这样子决定的能力，是一个法治的非常好的一个净土。就是当法治到足够好到可以去制约政府人员去采取不正当的、不明智的政策，去伤及更多的人，以便得到自己的小小的利益，这样的时候，那么这个行为是要被制止并且被反对的。这就是从我们经济政策上分析我们的国家体制和人民运转的一个切身问题。那么我们继续从这个 inexpedient 继续啊。Either because they will fail or because their costs will outweigh the advantages. This means that so long as they are compatible with the rule of law, they cannot be rejected out of hand as government intervention, but must be examined in each instance from the viewpoint of expediency. The habitual appeal to the principle of non-interference in the fight against all ill-considered or harmful measures has had the effect of blurring the fundamental distinction between these kinds of measures which are and those which are not compatible with a free system. And the opponents of free enterprise have been only too ready to help this confusion by insisting the desirability or undesirability of a particular measure could never be a matter of principle, but is always one of expediency.
Expediency.
权宜之计. Expediency means doing what is convenient rather than what is normally right, morally right. You see, you have to, in order to do expediency, 权宜所谓的权宜之计，就是它不一定是更道德的这个政策。 但是它比较方便这么做。Is convenient than what is morally right. 选择更方便的事情，然后放弃道德准则，做更方便的事情。Expediency。而我们所说的这个讨论的问题呢，是这个权宜之计更重要呢，还是 the matter of principle, the rule of law 这个我们所说的这个法治的这个观念重要？就是法治观念所承载的这个核心原则重要呢，还是权宜之计重要？本章的目的就是要指明，法治给我们提供了一个鉴别的标准，可以将那些同自由制度能相容的措施和那些不能相容的措施加以区分。对那些能相容的措施，可以再进一步按实用有力的标准去加以参考考察。当然，这样的措施中有许多仍然是不可取甚至有害的。但是对于那些同自由制度不能相容的措施，哪怕是提供了能达到一个可取目标的有效甚至唯一有效的手段，也必须予以拒绝。我们将要看到，遵守法治是使自由经济得以令人满意的运行的一个必要条件，但并不是充分的条件。但是重要的一点是，政府的一切强制行动都必须明确无误的由一个持久性的法律框架来决定。这个框架使人能带着一定程度的信心来进行规划，使前景的不确定性缩小到最小限度。哇，我感觉读到了一个非常核心的点，也是大家正在面临的一个问题。In other words, right, it is the character rather than the volume of government activity that is important. A functioning market economy presupposes certain activities on the part of the state. There are some other such activities by which its functioning will be assisted, and it can tolerate many more, provided that they are of the kind which is compatible with a functioning market. But there are those which run counter to the very principle on which a free system rests, and which must therefore be altogether excluded if such a system is to work. In consequence, a government that is comparatively inactive but does the wrong thing may do much more to cripple the forces of the market economy than one that is more concerned with economic affairs but confines itself to actions which assists the spontaneous forces of the economy. 你看，多么重要的，哎呀，多么重要的这个理论呀！可惜只是在1960年的时候写成的，也就是说，他去根据他所观察到的数据和事实，直到1960年前，或者说他是从1950年开始写的。他有花了5到10年的时间去观察过去人类历史中所有的这些经济政策、法治上的变化和实际产生的情况，去总结了这些经验教训。1960年，想想中国的经济是怎么样的，美国的经济是怎么样的，他们是以什么样的经济政策在去实践，然后到现在我们所知道的更好的方式是怎么样的？政府干预应该干预多少？自由市场应该自由多少多大？这些是不是都是我们现在可以去采取 借鉴并且去实践的一些方针政策和方向呢？ It is the purpose of this chapter to show that the rule of law provides the criterion which enables us to distinguish between those measures which are and those which are not compatible with a free system. Those that are may be examined further on the grounds of expediency. Many such measures will, of course, still be undesirable or even harmful, but those that are not must be rejected, even if they provide an effective or perhaps the only effective means to a desirable end. We shall see that the observation of the rule of law is necessary, but not yet a sufficient condition for the satisfactory working of a free economy. But the important point is that all coercive 你好，谢谢，休息一下，看看书。Oops. It is the purpose of this chapter to show that the rule of law provides the criterion which enables us to distinguish between those measures which are and those which are not compatible with a free system. Those that are may be examined further on the grounds of expediency. Expediency. Man, I need to really digest this word.
Expediency.
What a word. Let's write it down. Expediency. Let's write this word down right here, right now. As it goes, expediency. 权宜之计啊 expediency. Let's see. Expede, 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 PD, 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 NC, PDNC, XPDNC. Wow, expediency could be XPDNC, expediency. Expediency, which is 方便权益利益权宜之计 interesting 权宜之计权宜之计 expediency 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 means doing what is convenient rather than what is morally right. Convenient versus morally right. Convenient. Convenient versus moral. Moral. Convenient versus moral. Wow. Expediency. I think this is a very nice note. Oh, 截图一下，谢谢。可以截图看。Expediency. I think this is very, very helpful that we can actually there you go. It is the purpose of this chapter to show that the rule of law provides the criterion which enables us to distinguish between those measures which are and those which are not compatible with a free system. Those that are may be examined further on the grounds of expediency. Many such measures will, of course, still be undesirable or even harmful. But those that are not must be rejected, even if they provide an effective or perhaps the only effective means to a desirable end. We shall see that the observation of the rule of law is a necessary but not yet a sufficient condition for the satisfactory working of a free economy. But the important point is that all coercive action of government must be unambiguously determined by a permanent legal framework which enables the individual to plan with a degree of confidence and which reduce human uncertainty as much as possible. You see what I'm saying? Such a pity, such a pity, 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 pediatric. Oh, take a little break. Let me take, let me take Uh, let's get back to the part two. We were reading, at the same time learning that there are a lot of factors that we should take consider. And it start with second part of unit 15, chapter 15, 经济政策与法治第二节。我们首先考虑一下两种政府行为之间的分野，一方面是政府的强制性措施，另一方面是单纯的服务活动。这当中不存在强制的问题，即使存在，也是因为有必要通过征税来为这些服务活动提供资金。如果政府仅仅从事于提供它，如果不提供，就没有谁能提供的服务。通常这是因为这些服务产生的好处无法只让愿意为之付费的人专门享受。那么在这个范围之内，唯一产生的问题就只是所得是否抵得上所付的代价。当然，如果政府要求提供某些特定服务的专有权，那么这些服务就不再是真正非强制性的了。一般而言，一个自由社会不单只要求政府对强制行为有垄断权，而且还要求政府的垄断权只限于强制行为，而在所有其他方面，政府应该在与任何其他人一样的条件下行事。Let us consider first the distinction between the coercive measures of government and those pure service activities where coercion does not enter or does so only because of the need of financing them by taxation. Insofar as the government merely undertakes to supply services which otherwise would not be supplied at all, usually because it is not possible to confine the benefits to those prepared to pay for them. The only question which arises is whether the benefits are worth the cost. Of course, if the government claimed for itself the exclusive right to provide particular services, they would cease to be strictly non coercive. In general, a free society demands not only that the government have the monopoly of coercion, but that is, have the monopoly only of coercion, and that in all other respects it operates on the same terms as everybody else. 政府在这个领域中普遍从事的，并且属于上述范围之内的活动，其中有许多能方便人们取得关于那些具有一般性意义的事实的可靠知识。这类职能当中最重要的是提供一个可靠而又有效的货币制度。另外一些几乎具有同等重要性的职能是规定度量衡标准，提供经过调查、土地登记、统计等等收集到的信息，资助甚至亲自举办某种教育。A great many of the activities which governments have universally undertaken in this field and which fall within the limits described are those which facilitate the acquisition of reliable knowledge about facts of general significance. The most important function of this kind is the provision of the reliable and efficient monetary system. Others, scarcely less important, are the setting of standards of weights and measures, the providing of information gathered from surveying, land registration, statistics, etc., and the support, if not also the organization of some kind of education. And the support if not also the organization of some kind of education. The support of that education is more important, I think. 政府的所有这些活动，是他为了个人能做出决断而提供良好框架之努力的一部分。这些活动向个人提供手段，供他们使用来达到自己的目的。其他许多物质性更浓厚的服务事业也都属于这一类。虽然政府不得使用其强制权力来将一些同执行法律一般规则无关的活动专门保留给自己，但是政府在与公民相同条件下从事所有这些活动，并无违反原则之处。尽管在大多数领域中，政府并没有多大的理由要这样去做，但是在某些领域中，政府活动的可取性是很难质疑的。All these activities of government are part of its effort to provide a favorable framework for individual decisions. They supply means which individuals can use for their own purposes. Many other services of a more material kind fall into the same category, though government must not use its power of corrosion to reserve for itself activities which have nothing to do with the enforcement of the general rules of law. There is no violation of principle in its engagement in all sorts of activities on the same terms as the citizen. If in the majority of fields there is no good reason why it should do so, there are fields in which the desirability of government action can hardly be questioned. 前面最后提出的那一些领域，包括一切显然有好处但又不会有竞争性的企业来提供的服务事业。这是因为无法或难以让受益者个人为这些服务事业付费。像这样的事业有卫生与保健事业，往往也有道路的修筑与维修，有市政当局向市民提供的许多舒适设施，包括在其中的所有亚当·斯密所描述的那些，虽然在最高的程度上有利于一个大社会，但其性质使得对任何个人或少数个人而言，其得益都抵偿不了花费的公共工程。还有许多其他种类的活动，政府希望由它去举办是合情合理的，这或则是为了保守军备机密，或则是为了促进某些领域的知识的发展。然而，尽管政府在任何时候都可能是最有资格在这些领域中起带头作用的，但这绝不能成为一个理由去推定情况会永远如此，从而赋予政府以独家包揽的责任。而且在大多数场合，根本就不需要政府亲自去经营这些。通常提供这些服务事业可以由政府承担一部分或全部财务责任，但业务的经营则交给一些独立的、在一定程度上彼此竞争的团体办理。而这样提供服务效果可以更好。To this latter group belong all those services which are clearly desirable, but which will not provide by competitive enterprise because it would be either impossible or difficult to charge the individual beneficiary for them. Such are most sanitary and health services, often the construction and maintenance of roads, and many of the amenities provided by municipalities for the inhabitants of cities included Also, are the activities which Adam Smith described as those public works which, though they may be in the highest degree dangerous to a great society, are, however, of such a nature that the profit could never repay the expense to any individual or small number of individuals. And there are many other kinds of activities in which the government may legitimately wish to engage in order perhaps to maintain secrecy in military preparations or to encourage the advancement of knowledge in certain fields. But though government may at any moment be best qualified to take the lead in such fields, this provides no justification for assuming that this will always be so and therefore for giving it exclusive responsibility. In most instances, moreover, it is by no means necessary that government engage in the actual management of such activities. The services in question can generally be provided and more effectively provided by the governments assuming some or all of the financial responsibility but leaving the conduct of the affairs to independent and in some measure competitive agencies. What a good point.
工商界对一切国营企业都持一种不信任的态度，这是有充分理由的。要保证这些企业能同私营企业一样在同等条件下经营，是十分难以做到的。而唯有这个要求得到了满足，才在原则上没有反对国营企业的理由。只要政府使用自己的一部分强制权利，尤其是它的征税权，来帮助自己的企业，那么这就总是会使这些企业获得一种事实上垄断的地位。要避免这种情况，就必须做到，凡是政府在任何领域给予自己的企业任何特殊的优惠，包括补贴，与之竞争的私营企业也应能够得到。要政府去满足这些条件，可能是极其困难的。正因为如此，反对国营企业普遍存在的偏见就得到加强。但这并不是说，凡是国营企业都应该排除在自由制度之外。的确，国营企业应该限制在狭窄的范围之内。如果太多经济活动受到国家的直接控制，这就可能成为对自由的一个真正的危险。但是这里反对的并不是国营企业本身，而是国家垄断。
There is considerable justification for the distrust with which business looks on all state enterprise. There is great difficulty in ensuring that such enterprise will be conducted on the same term as private enterprise. And it is only if this condition is satisfied that it is not objectionable in principle. So long as government use any of its coercive power and particularly its power of taxation in order to assist its enterprise, it can always turn their position into one of actual monopoly. To prevent this, it will be necessary that any special advantages, including subsidies which government gives to its own enterprise in any field, should also be made available to competing private agencies. There is no need to emphasize that it would be exceedingly difficult for government to satisfy these conditions and that the general presumption against state enterprise is thereby considerably strengthened. But this does not mean that all state enterprise must be excluded from a free system. Certainly, it ought to be kept within narrow limits. It may become a real danger to liberty if too large a section of economic activity comes to be subject to the direct control of the state. But what is objectionable here is not state enterprise as such, but state monopoly.
再者，自由制度在原则上并不排除所有那些调整经济活动的一般性法规。 但制定这些规定要采取一般性规则的形式，具体说明每个从事某一活动的人所必须满足的条件。这些法规，特别是包括所有那些对生产技术加以规范的规定。我们在这里所关心的，并不是这些法规是否定的明智，这一点只有在例外的场合才会做到。这些法规总是会限制试验的范围，从而对可能有益的发展起阻挠作用。这些法规通常总是会提高生产成本或者降低总的生产率，反正都是一回事。但是如果这种对费用的对费如果这种对费用的影响已经被充分估计到，并仍然认为值得付出这样的成本去达到某一特定目的，那么对此也没有什么可以多说的。经济学家仍然会疑虑重重，认为有强有力的理由来反对这样的措施，因为这样的措施的总成本几乎总是被人低估，而且尤其是阻碍新发展的出现，这个不利因素总是没有得到人们充分的考虑。不过，如果比如说由于健康的考虑，零火柴的生产和销量通常是受到禁止的，或者只有在采取一定措施的条件下才被允许，或者比如说夜班工作通常受到禁止，那么这些措施是否妥当，应该通过对全面的得失的比较来判定。这是不能靠诉诸一般性原则最最后确定的。这一点对于通常被称为工厂立法的那一大批法规来说都是适用的。
Furthermore, a free system does not exclude on principle all those general regulations of economic activities which can be laid down in the form of general rules specifying conditions which everybody who engages in a certain activity must satisfy. They include, in particular, all regulations governing the techniques of production. We are not concerned here with the question of whether such regulation will be wise, which they probably will be only in exceptional cases. They will always limit the scope of inter experimentation and thereby obstruct what may be useful developments. They will normally raise the cost of production or what amounts to the same thing, reduce all overall productivity. But if this effort on cost is fully taken into account and it is still thought worthwhile to incur the cost to achieve a given end, there is little more to be said about it. The economist will remain suspicious and hold that there is a strong presumption against such measures because their overall cost is almost always underestimated, and because on disadvantage in particular, namely the prevention of new developments, can never be fully taken into account. But if, for instance, the production and sale of phosphorus matches is generally prohibited for reason of health or permitted only if certain precautions are taken, or if night work is generally prohibited, the appropriateness of such measures must be judged by comparing the overall cost with the gain. It cannot be conclusively determined by appeal to a general principle. This is true of most of the wide field of regulations known as factory legislation.
今天常常有人断言，如果没有给予行政当局广泛的真情量裁权，而且一切强制行为又都要受到法治的限制，那么这些任务以及其他通常被承认为是政府固有职能的任务就不可能充分实现。但这种担心是没有多大理由的。虽然法律不可能总是列举出当局在某一特定情况下可以采取的什么措施，但是可以这样来制定法律，以使得任何公正的法院都能够裁决所采取的措施是否为实现法律所追求的一般目的所必须。尽管当局采取行动时所可能遇到的千差万别的情况是无法预料的，但是，一旦某一特定情况出现时，当局处理的方式如何，却是有很大程度上可以预言的。毁灭一个农场主的畜生，以制止某一传染病的蔓延；毁坏房屋，以防止火势的扩大；禁用某一受到污染的水井。要求在高压电力的输送中采取保护措施，以及在建筑物中执行安全规章，这些无疑都是要求赋予当局以一些在运用一般规则方面的酌情量裁权。但这并不一定是不受一般规则限制的酌情量裁权，或是那种不受司法审核的酌情量裁权。这样的措施通常都被说成是证明有必要给予酌情量裁权的一个证据。这种说法我们这样习以为常，以致当我们发现早在30年前，一位著名的研究行政法的学者竟能指出下面一个道理时，我们会感到惊讶。他说：大体上说来，保健与安全规章在行使酌情量裁权方面丝毫也不引人注目，恰恰相反，在很大部分的这类法规中，引人注目的是缺少这种权利。所以，英国工厂立法就认为，实际有可能完全依靠一般性规则，虽然在很大程度上是由行政法规所规范。许多建筑法规是这样来判定，以便只许最小限度行政酌情量裁权。几乎所有规章都只限于一些可以标准化的要求，在所有这些场合，灵活性的考虑都让位于私人权利应有确实性的这一更高的考虑，而又不使公共利益蒙受任何明显的牺牲。
It is often maintained today that cases of similar tasks, which are generally acknowledged to be proper functions of government, could not be adequately performed if the administrative authorities were not given wide discretionary powers, and all coercion were limited by the rule of law. There is little reason to fear this. If the law cannot always name the particular measures which the authorities may adopt in the particular situation, it can be so framed as to enable any impartial court to decide whether the measures adopted were necessary to achieve the general effect aimed at by the law, though the variety of circumstances in which the authorities may have to act cannot be foreseen. The manner in which they will have to act once a certain situation has arisen can be made predictable to a high degree. The destroying of a farmer's cattle in order to stop the spreading of a contagious disease, the tearing down of houses to prevent the spreading of a fire, the prohibition of an infected well, The requirements of protective measures in the transmission of high tension electricity and the enforcement of safety regulations in building undoubtedly demand that the authorities be given some direction in applying general rules. But this need not be a desertion unlimited by general rules or of the kind which need to be example from judicial review. We are so used to such measures being referred to as evidence of the necessity of conferring discretionary powers that is comes somewhat as a surprise that as recent as 30 years ago an eminent student of administrative law could still point out that health and safety statutes are, generally speaking, by no means conspicuous for the use of discretionary powers. On the contrary, in much of that legislation, such powers are conspicuously absent. Thus, British factory legislation has found it possible to rely particularly altogether on general rules, though to a large extent framed by administrative regulation. Many building codes are framed with a minimum of administrative discretion, particularly all regulation being limited to requirements capable of standardization. In all these cases, the consideration of flexibility yield to the higher consideration of certainty of private right without any apparent sacrifice of public interest.
在所有这些事例中做出决定的依据都是一般性规则，而不是支配着政府之行动的特殊偏好，或是有关特定的人应被摆在什么位置上的意见。政府的强制权利仍然是为一般性并且不受时间限制的目的服务，而不是为特定的目的服务。政府不应区别对待不同的人们，授予政府的酌情量裁权是有限的酌情量裁权。这就是说，政府官员必须贯彻一般性规则的精神。如果说这条规则在被运用时无法以完全明确无误的形式表达出来，那么这是人类的缺陷造成的。然而，问题就在规则的运用上，这一点可以从下面一个事实中看出，即一个绝不代表当下政府或大多数人的特定愿望或价值观的独立法官，将能够不但确定当局到底是否有权那样做，而且还能够确定政府所谓是否恰恰正是法律要求的。我们在这里所谈的，同那些为政府的行动提供理由的规章，究竟是否对整个国家一视同仁的问题无关。同样，这些规则是否是由一个民主选出的议会制定的问题无关。显然有必要由地方当局通过一些规章，其中一些规章如建筑规程，必须只能在形式上而非在内容上是多数人决定的结果。实质问题涉及的还是被授权力的界限，而非该权力的来源。由行政当局自行制定，但即时先以适当方式公布，并且得到严格遵守的规章，比起那些经由立法行动授予行政机关的含糊不清的酌情量裁权来说，是更为符合法治的。尽管一直有人以为以行政上的实用有利为理由提出抱怨，说这些严格的限制应该放松，然而这肯定不是要达到我们迄今为止所考虑的目标的一个必要要求。 只有在法治已经由于谋求其他目的而遭到破坏之后，维护法治的必要性似乎才会变得不如行政效率方面的考虑更重要。
We are so used to such measures being referred to as evidence of the necessity of conferring this discretionary powers that it comes somewhat is a surprise that as recent as 30 years ago. In all such instances, the decisions are derived from general rules and not from particular preferences, which guide the government of the moment or from any opinion as to how particular people ought to be situated. The coercive power of government still serve general and timeless purposes, not specific ends. It must not make any distinctions between different people. The desertion conferred on it is a limited desertion in that the agent is to apply the sense of a general rule, that this rule cannot be made completely unambiguous in its application is a consequence of human imperfection. The problem, nevertheless, is one of applying a rule, which is shown by the fact that an independent judge, who in no way represents the particular wishes or values of the government or of the majority of the moment, will be able to decide not only whether the authority had a right to act at all, but also whether it was required by law to do exactly what it did. The point at issue here has nothing to do with the question of whether the regulations justifying the actions of government are uniform for the whole country or whether they have been laid down by a democratically elected assembly. There is clearly need for some regulations to be passed by ordinance, local ordinances, and many of them, such as building codes, will necessarily be only in form and never in substance the product of majority decisions. The important question again concerns not the origin but the limits of the powers conferred. Regulations drawn up by the administrative authority itself, but duly published in advance and strictly adhered to, will be more in conformity with the rule of law than will vague discretionary powers confer on the administrative organs by legislative action. Though there have always been pleas on the ground of administrative convenience that these strict limits should be relaxed, this is certainly not a necessary requirement for the achievement of the aims we have considered so far. It was only after the rule of law had been reached for other aims that its preservation no longer seemed to outweigh consideration of administrative efficiency.
四，我们现在应该转过来看看法治在原则上所排斥的另一个政府措施。这些措施不可能单单靠执行一般性规则而实现，而是必须包含着专断的、区别的对待人们。这些措施当中最重要的就是一些有关应该准许谁去提供种种服务或商品，价格如何，数量有多少的决定。换言之，就是一些只在经济经营种种业务与职业的机会，对销售条件，对可以生产或销售多大数量加以控制的措施。 就是经济措施。
We must now turn to the kinds of governmental measures which the rule of law excludes in principle because they cannot be achieved by merely enforcing general rules, but of necessity involve arbitrary discrimination between persons. The most important among them are decisions as to who is to be allowed to provide different services or commodities, at what prices or in what quantities. In other words, measures designed to control the access to different trades and occupations, the terms of sale, and the amounts to be produced or sold.
就进入种种职业队伍这件事而言，我们的原则并不一定排除在某些情况下只允许具备合适的资格的人从事这些职业，可能是可取的。但是将强制只限于贯彻一般性规则，就要求做到任何人只要具备这些资格，就有权要求并得到进入一个职业的许可，而给予或不给予这一许可，只取决于他是否满足那些作为一般规则定下来的条件，而不取决于任何由发放许可的当局自行斟酌量裁而指定的情况，例如地方上的需要。甚至连实行这些控制措施，在大多数场合也可以是不必要的，只要防止那些不具备这些资格的人冒充有此资格，也就是说，通过运用一般规则来防止弄虚作假也就行了。可达到这个目的，对某些表示这些资格的职称和学位加以保护，也就绰绰有余了。即使以医生为例，也看不出为什么偏要把获取行医执照作为开办医疗诊所的必要条件。但有一点大概是不容否认的，那就是某些业务，例如毒药与枪支的销售，唯有具备某些智力上与道德上的品质的人，方可获准经营。这一点既是可取的，又是无可厚非议的。只要任何一个具备必要资格的人都有权从事有关的职业，必要时这个人又可以要求一个独立的法院审查并强制实行自己的要求，那么基本的原则也就得到了满足。
So far as the entry into different occupations is concerned, our principle does not necessarily exclude the possible advisibility in some instances of permitting it only to those who possess certain ascertainable qualification. The restriction of coercion to the enforcement of general rules requires, however, that anyone possessing these qualifications have an enforceable claim to such permission and that the grant of the permission depend only on his satisfying the conditions laid down as a general rule and not on any particular circumstances, such as local need, which would have to be determined by the discretion of the licensing authority. Even the need for such controls could probably be rendered unnecessary in most instances by merely preventing people from pretending to qualification which they do not possess. That is, by applying the general rules preventing fraud and deception. For this purpose, the protection of certain designations or title expressing such qualification might well be sufficient. It is by no means evident that even in the case of doctors, this would not be preferable to the requirement of a license or practice. But it is probably undeniable that in some instances, such as where the sale of poisons or frame firearms is involved, it is both desirable and unobjectionable that only persons satisfying certain intellectual and moral qualities should be allowed to practice such trade, so long as everybody possessing the necessary qualifications has the right to practice the occupation in question, and if necessary, can have his claim examined and enforced by an independent court, the basic principle is satisfied. Let's take a little break, people. Actually, it's been 2 hours. I think, yeah, 2 hours of reading in the morning has been done. And you know what? I will just close the book and to think about what's left in my mind for reading the past passages in chapter 15, the economic policy and the rule of law. Economic policy and the rule of law is the main subject that we are discussing here. And it happens to be that expediency are often in the way as an explanation for public economic policies from government by using coercive power, discretionary powers, to make such policies to advance certain aim. But those aims, those current temporary aims, is not the reason for abandoning the rule of law, which is that whatever policy you are applying supposed to be universal and general to the public. Therefore, you cannot use the policy to help certain people to get monopoly in certain fields, therefore hindering the others who is in the same trade become dependent on the state power. Well, actually, if you think about it, that the ones, the economists and the policy makers seems to be on the different side of the discussion that once you become the servant of the state, you are very likely to use your position to maximize the benefits for yourself, having an unjust advantage in the market, therefore disrupting the market. And by disrupting the market, you can keep benefits where others suffer and pay for your benefits. Then those people under these restrictions are not free. And that should be prevented in a general sense. So whoever can protect their own rights. Let's stop there. And maybe we'll come back soon after to play some music. Yeah?
there. On those writings I stole and shared was the people who I care.
Summertime, summertime.
It's the way. Hunger
再烂的剧情，我都是主角。就像哪吒说的那句话：“我命由我不由天。”第二，量子暗示法，把讨厌的人备注改成命运改造大师。行为认知学派有一个著名的实验，标签转换可降低50%的精神内耗。当你一旦拥有足够的信仰之后，接下来就是自我崛起。神经科学早就发现，人脑在25岁后会默认进入节能模式，放弃个性，迎合标准，变成社会机器上的螺丝钉。那些实现灵魂救赎的人，本质是强行破解了这套系统。这里有一个重要的逻辑，叫做混蛋逻辑。翻译成大白话就是：太乖的人没有命运，只有任务情感。为什么狂人更容易被命运偏爱呢？因为他们的自我是一台碎纸机，专门粉碎别人的期待感。施一公在自我突围里说，所有伟大的突破最初都会被贴上离经叛道的标签。乔布斯在斯坦福演讲时说，你要相信那些被否定的疯狂才是答案。如果你也想把这种混蛋逻辑变成自己的护城河，你可以尝试通过这3个方法。第一，解除封印，每周做一件设定外的事情，比如大胆的开一场直播，解除别人对你的封印。第二，建立结界，给自己设计一套反标准话术，比如把抱歉换成谢谢你的理解。第三，制造引力，用主动暴露缺陷来收割能量，也就是大胆地展示你的脆弱性，因为展示脆弱性能够提升观众30%的吸引度。最后就是粉碎完美主义的诅咒。斯坦福悖论实验室有一个惊天的发现，过度规划的方案成功率会比随机行动的成功率要低27%。灵魂的成长路径是混沌状态的，所有预先设计的完美都是牢笼。宇宙唯一的真理就是，你烧毁剧本的瞬间，神明才会现身。这有点像我之前视频里说的，绝对的臣服会给你带来像天启一样敏锐的直觉和心流。不知道你们有没有听过一个量子物理的延迟选择试验？你的每一个动作都在改写过去的因果。这个世界上你提前计划的几乎看似很完美的事情，99%都不会如愿发生，但是大部分发生的事情几乎都在计划之外。其实命运就像一个小偷，你越规规矩矩，他越贪得无厌；你活成一场大爆炸，他反而跪下来给你加冕。前天发了一条关于灵魂4%的视频，收到了50多万人的喜欢。同样，前天发了一条关于灵魂4%的视频，收到了50多万人的喜欢。同样，前天发了一条关于灵魂4%的视频，收到了50多万人的喜欢。
Hello. Somebody. Do 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 do.